I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking about the benefits of having a doula after experiencing the fertility journey, miscarriage, or loss, and really why that would be beneficial. So for me, I had my kids years ago, and really a doula or a midwife was really not even on my radar. And so to now, today it has become more popular. But I wanted to explore why that would be important for someone that has been on the fertility journey. And not only can it help medically, there's lots of benefits to having a doula that can help with your pregnancy, as well as the emotional side of this. And some people are bringing in a doula as early as 8 to 10 weeks of pregnancy. So I want you to dig into today's episode, have you explore bringing a doula onto your team. Excited for you to listen, and feel free to leave a review on iTunes. Hey there, I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 2 spots available per month to work with us. So the Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery call is for action takers, and really people who are ready to move forward so they can finally have their baby. And if you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. So if you're seriously considering working with us, go to FabFertile, FabFertile.com, and click on book a free call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. That's FabFertile, FabFertile.com, and click on book a free call.
The bigger thing I'm trying to convey here is flexibility. The more that we have flexibility in our approach to our birth intentions, then I think the more satisfying birth experience you're going to have.
Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Clark, and my mission is to inspire, motivate, and empower you. Most of all, I want you to wake up. So with functional medicine, we can discover what causes infertility and eventually reverse the condition. Today, I'm welcoming Jen Laird to the podcast, and we're digging into why having a doula is beneficial after infertility and loss. So Jen and her partner, Elise, who couldn't be here actually today, she's attending a birth. They have been attending births for over 25 years. Their other professional roles include birth doulas, postpartum doulas, childbirth educators, prenatal yoga teachers, placenta encapsulator, former midwifery students, and the most challenging and rewarding title, mom. They have a podcast you can find on iTunes or Spotify. It's called Pushing It. So definitely check that out. And you can find them on Instagram or Facebook under Pushing It _podcast. And before we jump into today's show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you listen to this to make sure you never miss an episode. Hey, Jen, excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me join today. I really appreciate it, Sarah.
Yeah, awesome. So can you share your journey as to how you came to work in this field?
I started as a mom, but even before I was a mom, I was kind of that person who liked the babies, who seemed to know about the babies, and who enjoyed being around folks who were pregnant and having small children. And then I had a good friend of mine who was actually in midwifery school and was like, man, I would love to do kind of what you do with babies and families and so on. And she's like, well, there's doula. Have you ever thought about being a doula? And I had no idea what a doula was at that point, even though I had my own 3 children, young children at the time. And so I looked into it, and I would say that I first fell in love with the idea of the babies and all of that. But then I very quickly realized I really like women, and I like supporting folks in this really transitional time in their lives, which very quickly turned into attending midwifery school, both in New Zealand and here in the United States. Got towards the end of that education and decided that really my heart lied in supporting all of the different types of models of care, meaning out-of-hospital birth, in-hospital birth, people who are choosing to use pain medication, people who were not choosing to use those things, and really wanted, I think, to support folks in a wide range. And pursuing midwifery in that type of out-of-hospital care couldn't provide that. So one thing that I love about being a doula is that I really get to be a support for people all the way through pregnancy and into postpartum as well. So that's a real joy of mine.
I love that. Yeah. And so everyone listening to this podcast right now, they're focusing on preconception health and they're on the fertility journey. And so I wanted to bring this episode of the podcast digging into the role of a doula. And okay, so my daughter's, she's about to turn 18. So she's just left for university. My son's 15. So literally this was not a thing. Having a doula or a midwife was not a thing that many years ago. And I know for sure if I was pregnant now that I would for sure have one. So I wanted to dig into that and why it would be helpful for people that are on the fertility journey to consider that once they become pregnant. So yeah, let's talk about what is the role of a doula?
I love that you just disclosed the ages of your kids. I have two that same age as well as one that's a little bit older than that. So I too, in my community, in the places that I was living, having a doula was a foreign concept. It wasn't something I was even familiar with. And I think that whether it be social media or maybe even folks in celebrities, et cetera, starting to talk about what a doula is. And I think I first want to kind of get the background of there is a doula for everybody. In the same way that in fertility or in other areas of our life, we resonate and we attach to and we feel like some individuals are more connecting with us. I feel the same way about a doula. You might interview a doula and go, wow, that person they're more natural than I would be, or the way that they talk is kind of not resonating with me. Whether we sometimes joke around for like there's crystal doulas, and I'm not making fun of those people, but I'm rather saying there's people who really are attracted to the energy of the earth and crystals, and they explain and they talk in that venue, right? And then on the other flip side, you've got somebody who's like, you know what, I'm not really attracted to those types of the way that somebody might express themselves. And maybe putting language about energy, it doesn't attract me. And so I think that's why I say there is a doula for everyone. There's not a one size fits all in finding a doula. I am totally getting away from your question.
No, that's good though. 'Cause I think it is. It's all about fit. Really, this person's going to be following you in the most exciting and potentially difficult and challenging and all these emotions role. So yeah, you want to have a fit. It's totally key.
Yeah. So the role of a doula, it's similar to what the service you're providing, which is support in fertility. The role of a doula is to support folks in pregnancy and birth. So that's a very simplistic answer to that. As a doula, I love it when we have somebody who's, 8-10 weeks pregnant and they reach out and say, hey, we want to do an interview, and they hire us right away. The way that my practice works is that we consider ourselves a doula to use during your pregnancy. Now, some doulas don't do a lot of pregnancy sort of encouragement, and others do. So that might be also a clarifying thing to look at with your desire to hire a doula is are you going to be with me through my pregnancy journey, or are you more thinking about the birth aspect of it? So one thing that as a doula I can do is somebody sends me an email or calls me and says, hey, gosh, my lower back has been really sore. Do you have a recommendation for, in our area, a chiropractor, a massage therapist, some exercises that I could do? So my support is non-medically centered. So I'm not going to tell you what supplement to take. That would be outside of my scope of care. If you would send me an email and say, hey, I've been having this lower pain in my pelvis, then what I might say is I would encourage you to check in with your provider. It sounds like you might have a UTI, but here are some other things that it could be and some stretches and so on. So I want to give non-medical advice to folks and definitely stay in my lane as far as being supportive and suggestive, but also not prescriptive, because that's not my role. I don't have a license in a healthcare field. So that's kind of a physical and making those suggestions and connecting with those local resources in your area. But it's also an emotional place. We will often get people during their pregnancies who are reaching out and going, here are some of the challenges that I'm having. Here's what I'm thinking about as we are looking ahead towards birth or postpartum. And the way my practice again works is that we meet with people for a postpartum visit a prenatal visit, and we talked in depth about not only what your birth experience and your hopes are for that time, but also postpartum and really setting people up for success during that time. My partner and I are really into talking about emotions and getting people equipped, whether that be through our knowledge base or an outside therapist, et cetera, of setting people up for understanding the potential emotional ramifications of, for instance, dealing with infertility and how that might come into play during birth and maybe some of the choices that they may make, as well as postpartum and what that mood might look like during that time. Now, the way that as a doula, I want to approach everybody is as a human being. I don't want to stereotype people. I don't want to go, okay, because you've had infertility, here's what X, Y, and Z is going to happen. It's not a linear line. It's human beings. But we do sometimes see some patterns emerge, and that would help me prepare folks if I know that, for instance, there has been some infertility issues in the past.
Great. And then as far as the benefits of having a doula, there's actually some medical benefits, but yeah, what are some of the benefits of having a doula?
Yeah, there is lovely research studies out there that show us that having a doula present during the birth experience does reduce your chances of needing a surgical birth, as well as postpartum mood disorders developing. I would say the things we can't put statistics around, though, would be having support, right? Having someone with you during this time who's in your corner as a cheerleader and as someone who's assisting you in an experience that you've never had before. So I guess to back up just a little bit, what does a doula actually do? Well, we're a non-healthcare provider, meaning we don't do vaginal exams and we're not taking your blood pressure and so on. But what we are trained in birth, in pregnancy related complications and things that might arise during pregnancy, as well as thinking about postpartum. We know about newborns and we know about breastfeeding and those options as well. So my job as a doula is to emotionally and physically support people during labor in particular, but also support during pregnancy. The way that I describe to folks is my second thought is how does a baby come down and out? So I want to help you move your body during labor in a way that's going to help your baby move into the most optimal position and lead to more of an efficient labor. So notice that I'm not promising that you're going to have pain-free, quick labor, right? What I am saying, though, is I'm going to emotionally and physically support you during this time. Sarah, I think some of the work that you do is about centering and mindfulness and reducing anxiety. And that's definitely along the way what I do as a doula. So I want to lessen anxiety by answering questions. You go into the bathroom, let's say we're at the hospital, you go into the bathroom and you notice some pink discharge. And you wonder, oh my God, who is bleeding? Is that me? Is that the baby? What's happening? Is this normal? Is this okay? So as a doula, I'm probably even, if I notice that, say, hey, that's really normal to have some pink discharge during that time. Or I notice the client is starting to really shake. And I'll just say, yeah, that's a really normal part of labor. That means your body's working really hard, as well as the hormones that are contracting your uterus right now. That often leads to some shaking. And I know it seems counterproductive because typically when we shake in normal life, there's a problem. You know, that's not normal. That's not okay that we're just starting to shake like that. And we should pay attention. And yet during labor, that's a really normal part. So what I'm seeing along the way is how do I lessen anxiety or fear by either answering questions that the client has or noticing things. And if the mood feels right, talking about those different experiences that they're having in their body. So I like to say, we're not going to do CrossFit or aerobic during labor, but you are going to move, because we do know that moving in labor and not just laying vertically is helpful in keeping contractions going and to making the labor more effective and reducing the length of time that you're in labor. I think it's also more satisfactory. It makes us feel stronger when we're able to move our body versus I'm sick in bed, I lay down, right? Labor is not a time that we're sick. It's a time that we're going to feel some discomfort. But even that, how do we use some mindfulness ideas of knowing discomfort, pain? I'm going to actually use that word pain. I feel pain and I'm not in labor. That signal goes to my brain, oh, get your hand away from that hot stove, get away, right? In labor, we like to help folks understand that that sensation is not something that we move back from. It's not a panic, uh-oh, something's wrong, fix it. Rather, it's how do we attune our brains to go, this is okay. This is my uterus working hard to help my baby come to me. I can do this. And so there's some of those techniques as a doula that I'm helping folks use. I'm not talking nonstop during a labor by any means. During a contraction, I might be using massage techniques where long, gentle strokes. If someone is feeling ill, and often people vomit during labor, it's just part of the process. I'm going to hold that vomit bag, and put a cold compress on their neck. Again, those questions that come up, the provider has suggested this intervention, and maybe I see on the face of the client, hey, you got some questions here. It looks like, or what I might say is, do you have any questions about that? And often in that relationship with a provider, there can feel this like, oh wait, I'm supposed to make a decision real quick. There's an immediacy to things, rather than labor and birth. It's a process, right? And there's very few times that there's the necessity of an immediate decision to be made. But as a doula, I can help to make things slow down that process by even asking, did you have a question about that? And then the client being able to say, yeah, actually I do. I'm just wondering, can you tell me more about X, Y, or Z? And they can say that to the provider, or then we can talk about it as well. Now, as a doula, what I don't do is I don't speak on behalf of my client, because that's unempowering. This is not my experience. I'm here to support this person, but this is not my experience. I think that's a caution as you interview doulas as well, that you can ask some clarifying questions that to ensure that doula is really looking to be a part of the support team, not to take over the support team. So imagine that you have an idea of what you want your birth to look like, and then you actually get into the experience and you change your mind. Well, as a doula, if I said, oh, no, she doesn't want that, she told me, that's not okay. I cannot speak on behalf of any human being. That needs to be, there's new factors that have come into play here, and so let that person speak for themselves. I also, as a doula, consider myself not only a doula to the person who is having the baby, but also to the support person, to the partner, to the family members who might be around. That I'm looking for ways to increase intimacy without placing expectation on that partner. There can be a way, right, subtly of going, wait, buddy, you should be doing that. Come over here and help push on the back, or whatever it might be. Or there's a way to draw that person out so they feel included, but also have choice. It's a big experience for everybody involved. And the sights and sounds of labor are probably not something that a partner has experienced unless they work in the healthcare profession or they've attended, a previous birth, right? And to recognize as well that partner they're seeing someone that they love most in the world go through a big experience, probably make some sounds that they've not heard before. Potentially there are sights of bodily fluids and blood, and they're in a medical setting that isn't probably feeling the most at home. And their partner is bringing the person they love the most, besides the person at the baby, into the world. So you can imagine that adrenaline is high, anxiety is potentially, a little bit higher than normal. This is not a walk in the park. And so as a doula, my job as well is to support that partner. So if it's a mealtime, I'm going to say, hey, do you want me to go and get you some food, or are you going to go grab some food? I'm going to encourage the physical well-being of the partner, because we often say, I'm not going to go home with the family, right? You guys are going to go home, and not only have you gone through this experience of birth, but afterwards you have to take care of the baby. And as somebody who has been attending births for over 12 years, I recognize that if I don't eat and stay hydrated during the time I'm with the family, my recovery is hard, because I usually miss at least one night of sleep in the process. So a partner is going to miss most likely a night of sleep. So you can imagine that our body is running on higher than normal adrenaline with no food and slightly dehydrated. We don't recover very well. And now you're going to send this partner and new parents home with needing to now learn a skill of taking care of a baby. That's not set up for a great, successful transition, right? So as a doula, I'm also looking out for the well-being of that partner and making suggestions along the way. And again, looking for ways to create a team aspect. So it might not be intuitive to a partner to know how to touch or interact, or maybe even they're starting to talk during a contraction and the partner is really needing to kind of focus, then I might just gently put my fingers up to my mouth, just kind of like, shh, and I'm not shaming anybody, but I have a way of like, this is what your partner's needing right now. This is how you can assist. And, it's body language too. I will sometimes have partners kind of look like, oh my God, what's happening? And I'm noticing that nonverbal language, even body language, and I'm doing a little thumbs up, like everything's okay. This is what birth looks like. Everything's okay. So I would also call myself a translator as well. If after baby's born, there's some complications or some extra help that, for instance, baby or mom needs, I'm able to explain what's happening while the people in the room are doing their jobs to stabilize. And I'm giving, again, that support to both the birthing person and the partner. I can't promise everything's okay, but I can certainly translate the experience. It reminds me of a few years ago, a client, the baby had needed some help, so was across the room at the warming table, and they were just helping clear out his lungs and ensure that everything was going okay. And at first he'd been kind of a dusky color, not that pink newborn look that we like to see, right? And Dad had gone over to the warming table and was, kind of watching what they were doing. And I said to Mom, I was like, can I go over and support Dad? And she goes, oh yeah. So I went and stood next to Dad and I explained, so what they're doing is giving him a little oxygen right now. So I was kind of translating what was happening. And Dad was really nervous and kind of upset and was crying even. And I put my hand on his shoulder and was like, yep. And it's just that nonverbal communication even, right? And then things started to change. Baby was starting to pink up. They were starting to put a diaper on the baby. And I said to Dad, they don't put diapers on babies that they're concerned about their breathing and about the way their body is transitioning. And so suddenly you could tell he went from a place of like, oh my God, what's happening? Into, oh, okay, that's good information. I guess we're okay now, right? And you noticed his emotions start to fade away and he felt more centered. And I was like, hey, reach over. You can totally touch his hand right now. And, you can talk to him and so on. And so, again, it's kind of that interpreting and supporting everybody in the room.
Yeah, so really being an advocate for the family, and yeah, as you say, translating as to what's going on, because some of it can be scary, and sometimes certain people aren't sure what they should be doing. So really being able to guide people along there, and yeah, just kind of back to the benefits, because there's also it reduces the C-section rate as well as the length of labor, and also I was reading studies and we're talking about even the need for an epidural. So those kind of medical side of things, all this emotional support, additional layer of support is helping with those things. Yeah. And so if someone obviously during the early days of pregnancy after infertility or loss can be quite nerve wracking, a lot of anxiety, potentially stress. And so
Um,
you, as a doula, potentially you could get in contact as early as 8 to 10 weeks. Yeah. And so how does, what would you do to help with someone in that stage? I was just looking at your website there about the power of touch, but how would
yeah.
that help?
How would the power of touch help?
Yeah, or just someone that is, 8 to 10 weeks pregnant, their early days, and they want to contact a doula. Yeah, what were some of the things that you would do in that stage?
Yeah, I think it can be symbolic to some folks as well.
Hmm.
I have tried for a long time for this pregnancy, and now I have it. And so to know I've got somebody in my corner who can be encouraging, that I can ask questions of, and that I can start to develop a relationship with, that I know is in my corner. I would say it's similar to, needing to go to an infertility clinic week after week, month after month, and you start to like, oh yeah, I like that nurse, and you have that relationship and rapport, I would suppose, from engaging with those healthcare providers. I think it's similar in that we're going to be with you through the process now of growing this baby. We want to be encouraging of like, this is actually a normal part of pregnancy. I know that up until this point, there has been a lot of intervention. And that's often what I will say to people that who have had that longer journey of getting pregnant or following loss. This is a time when you enjoy the aspect of growing a baby. So sure, you can read some things and you can practice some things, but I also want you just to settle in yourself about growing a baby. Otherwise, that 9 months can feel like a super long time. And there are people even that will come in like, okay, yay, I'm finally pregnant. Now let's talk about getting this baby out. And I'll say, excellent. You will think about getting this baby out, but for now, can we concentrate on growing this baby? And I think the emotional aspects of some folks who have experienced loss, they're still grieving. They're still grieving during this pregnancy. And the challenge of sitting with two things at once, one of trust and joy, trust in the process of growing this new person, joy that you are growing this new person. And on the flip side, the other hand, there is the grief of loss of the baby that didn't get grown into, an infant that came to live in your house, or having lost that infant, stillbirth, for instance, or the folks who are like, oh my gosh, it has been such a long journey and I'm carrying the grief of this didn't go how I wanted it to. I had infertility, and all of that can cause quite a bit of emotional challenge along the way. So I think as a doula, it's my job to help support people along the way in that journey, but also just to normalize some of that experience. I recently had a client that had loss and some infertility, both. And it's interesting to go into her home and notice that, yes, she has a car seat and she has blankets and outfits for the baby. But when you go into the room that some of those things are kept in, it's a completely empty room. And in the closet, they have put some of those things for baby, right? But there's definitely not a physical space that has been worked on. She didn't nest in a way that was preparing that space in a stylistic or designing way, right? And I say that with absolutely no judgment. For her, she prepared emotionally for having a baby, but she chose not to prepare physically because it was just too much, because of that disappointment and that grief she was handling during the growth of this baby during that pregnancy, right? And then I'll have other clients that I've worked with where you go into that physical space and they have the beautiful, designer, whatever. They have a beautiful space. You can tell that they have definitely put a lot of energy into creating a physical space for that baby to come and join their home. And yet sometimes the emotional space that's dusty, right? That hasn't been created and tended to in the same way that their physical space has. And I think for those who have had infertility or loss, unfortunately, there is a lot of there's a lot of challenge emotionally in creating a space in their heart and the grief, of course, that they're potentially carrying. And again, I want to be really careful here that I'm not stereotyping folks at all, but these are tendencies in my line of work that I've seen. And my heart is in compassion goes, man, it really sucks. It sucks that you've had to have this journey of working hard or grief or loss to get to this point where you're now having this new baby. But I think it's important that we recognize the potential challenges that people face that are different than someone who just, let's try to get pregnant. Great, we're pregnant, and now we're having a baby. That we recognize and help, tend to and prepare those folks for emotion is okay. And now how do we approach emotion? And how do you know that your risk for some of these mood disorders, they're just higher because of your journey to get here?
And so do you do like one-on-one coaching with people, or how would you support people in those early days then is it in person? Or?
Again, as much as I don't want to stereotype pregnant folks who have had infertility or loss, I would say in my practice as a doula, that is something that I specialize in and that I see as a value in my practice as a doula. I think going back to asking those questions of a doula, can you tell me more about what your support during my pregnancy might look like? Am I able to have phone conversations or email exchanges with you in those regards? Because it all depends on the doula. Some folks really take initiative and have a desire for that support during pregnancy, and other people would consider themselves more, I'm at the third trimester with you, and we're going to have our prenatal visits, and I'm going to be there for your birth, and I'm going to do, some visits postpartum, but I don't really specialize in that, and they might refer you on to a therapist. I think it is, it's also, we need to make sure that we're staying within our own, I don't act as a therapist, but I'm going to help, recognize and be with folks in emotion as well. So I think that's a great clarifying question to ask as you interview doulas.
Excellent. As far as a birth plan, when people are dealing with that, what's your thoughts on a birth plan? Yeah, I know personally that I had one and it went out the window. Like I was so obsessed with doing this breathing and all this stuff. And then when it came to it was like 18 hours and she wouldn't come out and ended up having a C-section. And so my birth plan was completely gone. But what's your take on birth plans?
I like to call them birth wish lists rather than a birth plan, right? So I can feel when I have a plan, for instance, of the day, and then when things don't go according to what I'm wanting that plan to look like, that can lead to a lot of disappointment, right? So if I even approach a vacation thinking, okay, here's what my plan is, and I put it out, here's exactly what's gonna happen, and I'm putting lots of intention into this is what I want, versus me going, here's kind of what I'm hoping for this vacation. If some of these things don't pan out, I'm okay with that. I want to remain flexible and leave space for there to be some changes. But in general, this is my hopes for this time. So I encourage people to approach their birth plan as more of a wish list. In most cases, I would encourage folks to have a one-page bulleted pointed list, right? Starting with, hi, my name is, and my partner's name is, and we're so grateful for the care that you're going to take care of us. A little background is that we have had, whatever it might be as an important thing to you. Some folks will say, I have a history of loss, or we had infertility, and we're so glad to be bringing this baby into the world. One or two sentences, not your life story. We providers don't have room for all that to read that. And then I would get away from putting in those bulleted points things like, we would like the lights dim, and this is the music that we would like to have played, and X, Y, and Z, right? I would keep it more simple. Typically, people don't birth well in a room where there's blaring lights. Typically, we like the door to be closed. And that, I would say, again, typically are things, particularly in a hospital environment, that they're going to try to do for you. I would keep it into more, we're hoping to have an unmedicated birth, and we will ask for medication if we so desire. We hope to use lots of different, movement during this labor. On the converse, if you are hoping to use some medication, then you can put that down. We intend to, at some point during our labor, have an epidural. That also can be helpful information for folks. And then there are some choices depending on, where you are, in North America here in particular, as far as medications that are offered to baby. And it can be nice to also put those things down of whether or not you choose to have those things or not. In general, those things include erythromycin eye ointment, vitamin K injection, and hepatitis B injection. So, of course, you're going to want to check in with, what's protocol in your area. But I want to give in that birth wish list, it's a bigger picture rather than getting down to the micro of, this is the song that I want played when my baby emerges into the world.
Sorry, is that something you'd share with the doula then? If you want go into that granular level, is that something that you're working with the client on?
I think as a doula, that's something I do naturally. I turn off the lights. I close the door. I make suggestions along the way. Hey, what would you be okay with? Why don't we try some music right now? That doesn't have to be actually written down. There can be more of we're in the situation and we're feeling it out. I would say those are points of conversation with a doula, but that doesn't need to be as part of a birth plan. Mm-hmm. So I guess the bigger thing I'm trying to convey here is flexibility. The more that we have flexibility in our approach to our birth intentions, then I think the more satisfying birth experience you're going to have. So let me further explain that. When I say intentions and when I'm saying be flexible, what I'm not saying is don't have hopes for your birth. It's yes, please have hopes and dreams for your birth experience and hold those things loosely, right? If I'm planning my wedding day, there is absolutely nothing I can do to keep that rain clouds away. But what I can do is plan for rental of a big tent or whatever it might be, right? So me renting a tent does not make it rain, me planning and having some intention for my birth is wonderful, but me also having flexibility so that I can get into the experience and then make choices that resonate with me at the time and not become disappointed if my birth doesn't go exactly the way I was hoping it to go. There's a quote by Penny Sinkin, who has done a lot of teaching. We kind of look at her as kind of the mother of doulas, but so much research, and she's actually formerly a physical therapist. And one thing that she says is that it doesn't matter if your labor is short or long, painful or pain-free, or has intervention, but it was whether or not you felt supported in the birth experience and were able to make decisions regarding your care. So that's I'm not directly quoting her, but that's essentially what she's saying. So I like to remind people, it actually doesn't matter if you have a super long birth or a super short birth. There are challenges either way. When you really think about it, having a C-section versus having a vaginal birth, or whether or not things got complicated or not, it's actually when people think back about their birth experience, they think about, did I feel supported and was I able to engage in the decision-making process? So if you have a birth plan, for instance, and things don't go right on there, are you able to look and go, wait, I made the best decision with the information that I currently had in that situation. Therefore, what I felt was empowered. I was empowered to make my decisions. And I felt supported by my partner, my provider, my doula, my care team. And that actually has longer term ramifications than whether or not your birth plan actually went exactly the way you were thinking it would. Because what I'm encouraging here is, how do you release control and embrace flexibility and the power that comes with making a decision when you're in the experience? I can imagine for folks, particularly who have dealt with infertility, there's this no element of control. It took me so long to get pregnant, and this has been frustrating, and I've had loss and all of that. Then, man, this birth is going to go the way I want it to because I'm going to have control. What I'm encouraging is you actually don't get control when it comes to, we have two people in a body. One person is growing that baby, and there's the anatomy of that person having the baby, and then there's the actual baby. And that baby has to navigate the pelvis. Your uterus has to contract. Your cervix has to open. And I'm sorry, there is not control that you have over those things. Sure, you can move your body in a way to help that baby come down and out, but ultimately you can't make your cervix open, right? And so that's why I think when I think about birth intentions, birth wish list, or a birth plan, the overarching thought behind all of that is, how do you approach this experience with flexibility and release control? That's actually what parenthood is also like, right? I can't control this birth experience. And once this baby comes out, I also can't control this child. I can react to this child. I can meet this child's needs. And I definitely can do my best to have a relationship and attach to this child. But ultimately, it's another human being, and I don't have control over them, right?
Yeah, to really look at that. It's sort of silly to say go with the flow, but there is kind of going with the flow and having some flexibility, and to examine if you feel you want to control, if you're feeling rigid. And it makes sense, because a lot of people that I'm coaching, that's what they're dealing with. And it's sort of that type A logical person. And if you've dealt with infertility and now going in with this plan, and then the plan kind of goes sideways, and then it can be disappointing. And so how do we, so as far as looking for a doula, so we talked a little bit about the training. Like what are we looking for, and how do we find one?
I think you want to look for somebody that, I started out saying I got into this because I love squishy newborn babies and all of that. And sure, that's partly why I originally got into this, but I quickly realized, oh man, I like people. I like supporting people in transitional times in their lives. And for me, I happen to like babies at the end, but I don't actually get to hold many babies, right? Because that's not my job. You've had a baby. I'm going to help you learn to breastfeed if you're choosing to breastfeed. But after a baby's born, it's not about me holding your baby. It's about you guys, right? So we want to think about finding a doula that, A, you can imagine yourself spending a good amount of time with them, right? So their personality makes sense to you. I would say in an interview with my business partner and I, they're going to get a flavor for who we are. They're going to hear us say, with non-judgment, we approach supporting people during this birthing process. And so we don't have an agenda for the type of birth we would hope that you have, because this is your experience and we support that. Now, there maybe on the flip side, you're looking for a doula who's like really into unmedicated. And so you're going to ask some clarifying questions to say, I really want somebody to support me to help me not to have an epidural. Okay. Now don't put too much pressure, because again, that is your choice in the moment. But if you were interviewing a doula who's really, more having a desire to support people who are medicated versus unmedicated, then you're going to start to see that come out. So some clarifying questions would be, how much experience do you have? Where have you attended births in your local area? Will you speak on my behalf to a provider? And depending on how you feel about that you can engage with that line of questioning. You can ask what are some of the tools that you might use to help support me both during my pregnancy as well as afterwards. Asking more about the type of prenatal visits you're going to get and whether or not those are in your home or at an office space, what communication looks like. And I think what we often even say to our own clients is you're going to get a vibe. You're going to feel like, yep, I felt really comfortable with that person, the way they were talking, even if it's somebody who's very opposite to your personality, you get this vibe. You're like, yep, that's it. I want you to trust your intuition. If your intuition after an interview is like, yeah, that really makes sense, I really liked her or him, then I think you can lean into that. You can also ask, at what point in my pregnancy do you go on call for my birth? So as a solo doula, I went on call at 38 weeks of pregnancy for, 2 weeks before someone's estimated due date. That meant that if you were 36 weeks pregnant and I had a vacation planned for a few days, I most likely was not going to reach out to you and tell you, hey, I'm going to be out of town for the next couple of days. Because contractually, I wasn't on call for you until 38 weeks, which means I'm not going to leave the city, right? Now, as a doula partnership with my partner and myself, one of us is always on call. So if you go into labor at 35 weeks, you call our number and you're going to get one of us because we don't take a vacation together.
And that's why your partner's not here today, because she is actually coming out of labor. Yeah. And so is there an actual website for doulas where they can go and find all the doulas, or is it where, I don't know if there's a body that governs it or anything like that?
Yeah, there are quite a few certifying organizations. Doula is one of those.
How do you spell that?
And so if you would go on Doula, D-O-N-A, if you go on the Doula website, there is going to be some links to here are certified doulas in your area. There is also Doula Match, which I believe is nationwide in the United States, but not it might be actually into Canada. I'm not sure on that. But Doula Match will then, you can put in your address, your zip code, and then it'll give you names of doulas that are in your area that you can then reach out to. Google, I know it sounds silly, but Googling a doula in your area is another way. And then kind of looking at, I'm going to get a feel for someone by their website, for instance. What are they talking about? Does this resonate with me? And then setting up, typically doulas provide a free meet and greet or interview. And it's usually about an hour long, and you get to kind of ask your questions. And a lot of doulas will do kind of like a little presentation. Because my doula partner and I have been doing this for so long, we have kind of our thing, our little spiel, which is not a spiel, but basically we're trying to hit all of the points that if you Googled questions to ask a doula, that you're going to find. And we've incorporated all of those things into helping people understand both who we are, our backgrounds, as well as the services we provide. And so we'll often have people interview us and go, oh, wait, I guess I don't have any questions because you covered all the things that Google told me I was supposed to ask a potential doula.
Awesome. So they go to Doula or Doula Match.
Yes, those are two great resources, as well as just, again, Googling doulas in your area.
Awesome. And is there a book or a website, an app, a documentary, anything that you're obsessed with right now that you'd like to recommend to everyone?
Yeah, I think a couple. I really like the book Mindful Birthing. Another helpful resource is the Pregnancy and Postpartum Anxiety Workbook. I'm sorry I don't have an author off the top of my head. I have bought both of them on Amazon. And maybe that's something even you could put in your show notes. Those are two excellent, and I think for your listeners, I think that would really resonate with them as you're more of a mindful-based practitioner.
I'm functional, so take a functional approach. We look at functional lab testing and all mindset and all of that. But yeah, definitely mindful birth. So pregnancy and postpartum workbook. Awesome. Yeah, we'll put a link to that. Anything?
Anxiety work.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, those are two of my favorites. Pregnancy, childbirth, and the newborn. It is co-authored by like three different authors, one of which is Penny Simkin. I really like that book as well. I feel like it's laid out. The information feels not oh no, this is a problem, but rather really informative. And again, I just really like the layout. I think it's important for people to be reading things not just about birth, but because birth, we usually say it, and I use my hands to illustrate kind of birth it lasts this long, but this is actually how long postpartum lasts, which is, weeks, right? Versus you're not in labor for weeks. So, sure, read about birth, but please read about having a newborn. Read about changes are going to be happening in your body and ways to support that as well. We do a lot of talking about that on our podcast as well, let's not put all of the emphasis on the birth. Let's also think about having that baby come live in your home.
Excellent. And is there a success story you'd like to share with us? I'm sure you have lots from 12 years of doing this.
Oh man, so many success stories. I think it's all these kind of sound bites or snippets of afterwards parents saying things like, oh man, I did it. And I am so proud of myself. Leaning into confidence and intuition and connection. It is a joy to walk through transition with folks, particularly who have worked so hard in dealing with anxiety or grief or loss. And then for them afterwards to hold this baby and as a representation not only of celebrating this child and the newness, but also the symbolicness of how they've gotten there, right? I think that is my joy, and that it's not always rosy and glamorous. As much as you want a child, there will be times after that baby's in your arms that you have no idea what to do, that they cry and your adrenaline spikes, or that you're exhausted because you haven't had enough sleep. And to know that sitting with opposing emotions is challenging all along the way, and yet there is the hope and the joy of new life and what that represents for you as a person, right? So I don't know. I think to put some confidence into folks, I see birth going normally and beautifully much more than I do it getting high risk and challenging. Mm-hmm. Recently, I supported someone who developed some pregnancy complications. She had preeclampsia, and it was determined that due to her high blood pressure and getting lab results as well, that preeclampsia was happening, and so an induction was necessary. So she was on Pitocin for about 2 days, along with medication that tends to not make you feel well. And that medication as well, magnesium, it counteracts what Pitocin is trying to do, which is to help the uterus contract. And so from a physical standpoint, to keep her body safe, we need to have magnesium. But then we have counteracting that, which is Pitocin, to let's make this uterus contract so we can get a baby, right? So 2 days of that. And she dilated beautifully, and she was very engaged in the process. And at the end, she chose, I think I can actually keep doing this. I know that an epidural, particularly for folks who have an induction and magnesium, you just do not feel well. She chose to keep going, and we had a beautiful, healthy baby who came out vigorous and crying. And, he is small but mighty. He was born at just under 5 pounds, and they stayed only a couple of days in the hospital before coming home. So I think I tell that story in the light of she engaged with the decision making along the way and felt really empowered in the process. And she faced the challenges of, honestly, a lot, right? That is a lot for somebody emotionally and physically to be handling. And in the end, she continued to engage with the challenges of feeding a tiny little human and getting them awake and all of that. But they're an adorable little family, and they're doing really well. They've definitely kept their sense of humor along the way, which is also really important.
Great. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And okay, so the listeners can find you on your podcast, Pushing It. It's on iTunes and Spotify. And what can they expect there?
Yeah. So our podcast is for folks who are growing babies, who have already had their babies. And we want to take a humorous approach and yet very informative and encouraging. So we're a place that you're going to get lots of great information, and hopefully you're going to laugh along the way as well. We think a sense of humor is important. There's some funny stuff that's happening at this time in your life, and yet we recognize the deepness as well of those challenges. So we want to help set you up for success, both in knowing what to expect during pregnancy, things about birth, as well as that postpartum and the mysteries of a newborn.
Awesome. Yeah. So check that out at Pushing It on iTunes and Spotify. Yeah. Thanks so much, Jen, for coming by and sharing your words of wisdom on doula, and really for someone that is on the fertility journey and has experienced loss or miscarriage, why that's important. And as you say, it wasn't even on my radar back in the day. And so, thanks for sharing about that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. One other thing to mention, I guess if you've kind of liked the way that I've described doulas and so on, I know that I live in Seattle, and the name of my doula business is Seattle Doulas. And so I would invite folks, if you maybe wanted to kind of get a sense of what my website representation is of kind of the words that I'm using and my vibe, I'd invite people to kind of look at seattledoulas.com to get an idea of how we've represented ourselves. And maybe you can use some of that knowledge to hone in on the type of doula that you might find helpful for your birth.
Perfect. So seattledoulas.com.
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Great. Sarah, I really appreciate you having me on today. And I'm hoping that it's been helpful to some of your listeners. And I guess I'm sending out hope and encouragement for all those who are sitting in that place of desire for a baby in their lives.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey there, I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 2 spots available per month to work with us. So the Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery call is for action takers, and really people who are ready to move forward so they can finally have their baby. And if you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. So if you're seriously considering working with us, go to FabFertile, FABfertile.com, and click on Book a Free Call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. That's FabFertile, FABfertile.com, and click on Book a Free Call. The Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, including show notes and links, provides information with respect to healthy living, nutrition, lab testing, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice, and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.